Welcome back to 50/50. I am delighted. I was trying to think of the right adjective. It's kind of a combo of excited, delighted, honoured. I always make a big fuss of you, Peter, because you're a big fuss for me. Like, I'm so happy that you're here.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really, really happy. I feel really honoured that you're here, actually. Sorry to start off a bit guns blazing, but I am, because I just think you do amazing work, and the fact that you're here today is just so nice. And we're going to talk about Peter the person more today. So I feel extra honoured.
Kind of rare, huh?
Yeah, right? Well,
Yeah,
you
it is.
do your thing.
No, thank you for having me. We go back a very long way, obviously. Have had long periods of not sort of physically crossing paths, but right back to postgrad at Curtin
Yes.
lecturing days and early businesses and teamwork. So, yeah, it's always a warm feeling for me too to, reconnect and chat with people who have such a long history with.
I know.
So,
I was
yeah.
thinking about how long it is, and we met. You were my lecturer for my postgrad in 2007. So we're like at 17 years, which feels wrong on so many levels.
It does. It's gone quickly.
Too long, right? Yeah, it's gone really quickly. So you're right. You were my lecturer. I met you then. We met when you had Vital Conversations, and we've met each other since at times over life, and then just sort of kept up with
Over
what each
life
other's
and
doing.
LinkedIn and messages here
Right,
and there.
like that. And seeing you at the International Women's Day when I was like, oh, my God, that's Peter. And I quite rudely said when you're on the panel, I just wanted to hear what you had to say, Peter.
Oh.
So I was thinking about, I don't like fangirling on podcasts when people are, oh, my God. And I started straight off fangirling, right? So I kind of broke my own rule. But I have to get it out of the way so then I can not feel like I have to do it the whole time. So this is my fangirling, right? So I've contacted you and told you this a few times. You will say something. You'll sometimes say one sentence and it'll change how I do something around a particular thing from then on, right? So when we were at uni, I had to do a prac, and I think it was you actually that set it up. I had to coach people at a law firm in Fremantle, and I was really worried they wouldn't want coaching. I was like, what if I can't get the numbers I need for my prac? And you said, just be okay with the no, like just be totally okay if they say no. And I was like, okay. And I reckon every couple of years I LinkedIn message you to say, do you remember that time you told me to be okay with the no? The number of times I've used that, the difference it's made to when I'm coaching people, selling to people with our Discern business, socially, it's been one of the most freeing things I ever learnt, because if you're okay with the no, just it opens up worlds.
There's less to fear, huh? Yeah.
It gives the other person total freedom. Like when I coach people, I say, let's see how we get along. When I sell to people, I say, look, we'd like to do the work for you if it's useful for you, but I have no fear of no. In deciding that you were right and I could get on board with that, it's given me this enormous freedom. There is no way I'm not going to be able to fangirl. I'll just have to get it all out and then we'll move on.
You can edit, yes.
No,
Yeah,
I'm not going to edit
me out.
I can't edit you out. I can't. But I've just got to say these things, because for me the impact you have is so big.
Thank you. And look, one of the things about our work, I think, is that you just never know those things. And, every now and again you get the privilege of hearing from somebody that you haven't spoken to for years, and they'll say, remember that one thing, remember that one conversation? And it just is the biggest privilege about what I get to do work-wise, is that you actually never know what that's going to be for people, So thank you. It means a lot.
You're very welcome. There's two things I want to say about that. One is that when we were communicating before this, you said that you had, was it 50,000 hours of one-on-one time?
Yeah, absolutely. I added up a conservative level of the last 32 years and, just really, really just not had a break from that, as much as the work itself has changed at times and the audience and the purpose has changed at times. Just so many of those conversations. It's like a massive PhD of learning, really, in terms of all of the different perspectives, and then the machine learning you get over time about what you're hearing, and so that's that's pretty special. Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite extraordinary. There's a poem that I really like, and I shared with some people at work that I might share later. But it's got the line, and it's by Ralph Waldo Emerson, and it says, "If one life has breathed easier because you have lived, that is to succeeded." Right?
Yeah. Wow.
To succeed. So then I think of 50,000 hours, or the reaction I have, and I've only shared one of the several things you've helped me with. It's so enormous, and I think that's why I find it hard not to jump up and down. There's I was thinking of when I was seeing you today, I was thinking of Out of Love Actually. Have you ever seen Love
Oh,
Actually?
yeah, word by word.
So Laura Linney brings the hot brunette home, finally gets hold of him, and she goes, "I've just got to do something." And she stands behind the wall and goes, and then goes, "Right, that's done."
Yeah.
That's kind of what I needed to get out of my system.
Oh, nice. Thank you. Yeah, look, interestingly enough, when I was thinking about this process, I was thinking about some of the things that I am most proud of, and it is equally the smallest things and the things that you struggle over and the things that you don't think you did well, that but you learn the most from. But the things that I feel like have been, that I hope have been most impactful, haven't even been those 50,000 hours.
Okay.
Yeah, just in terms of some of the world's biggest mental health check-in stuff,
Oh,
and some of
yes.
just the general messages that you try and get across to organisations and leaders, that obviously that they then will do the work with, hopefully on a repetitive basis.
Yeah, right.
So that sort of impact, there is the stuff that the possibility of impact there is incredibly motivating. Yeah,
The exponential nature of what's possible,
totally.
right?
Yeah.
I was reading the story you wrote to yourself when you were launching Performance Story and talking about a bit of your history. And one of the things I noticed on there was you saying I'll paraphrase, you might remember exactly what you said, but it's the feeling that it's never enough.
Yeah.
And that was something that I wanted to explore with you today. But I think with your permission, I'll come back to that.
Yeah.
And I thought what I'd mention is in that story of your history, from what I could tell, it kind of started, the story you wrote kind of started from being a psychologist and going from there. And I thought, I wonder what happened before that.
Yeah.
And I thought maybe we could touch on that. And I thought, we've missed a trick here. If I had put on LinkedIn, who wants to know what about Peter? Peter the person, not Peter the subject matter expert, or really at this point, the name Peta Slocombe is almost a brand. It's like a whole world in that name professionally.
I don't know about that, but
But then you're Peter, right?
yeah,
What's your maiden name?
Bennett.
Peter Bennett.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, which is interesting because the CEO of Clough's name is Peter Bennett.
It is,
And
male Peter Bennett.
And, I reached out to him a number of years ago and just sort of said, look, I've just got to get this over and done with like every time I see your name. So he's a very good friend now. Yeah.
Oh,
it's
that's so
lovely guy.
nice.
Yeah.
That's so nice. I got to meet him briefly because when I went and first had coffee with Ash McGrath, he happened to be there, so I got to meet him then. Okay, so before you do psychology, you're little Peter. So let's ask the boring questions so we get a bit of the human being stuff. So where were you born?
Born in Perth.
Okay.
Yeah, born in Perth. Equal youngest of four. I'm a twin. So there are two of us wandering around in the world. She has a much nicer personality and I'm taller, is the way to tell us apart. One of four girls born within 4 years of each other, so very, very close.
Wow.
Mum was a nurse before she married, and Dad was a quadriplegic, and met Mum in hospital when she was caring for him.
Oh, wow.
Grew up, incredibly privileged and lucky, strong family values. I think, growing up in that environment and seeing the combination of, Mum's selflessness as well as Dad's grit, to get through with his significant limitations physically, was really the hallmark of what all four of us have ended up doing in our lives.
Yeah.
Went to private school, Competed a lot, started competitive swimming at about the age of 5, I think. First state record at 8. Moved into surf lifesaving sort of halfway through there, as a lot of pool swimmers do, which became a real passion, and did that for a lot of years. I think retired pretty much at 23-ish when study and everything became quite big. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah.
Wow, that's extraordinary. There's so many different elements to that. So you're the baby with your sister. You guys are identical or fraternal?
Fraternal.
Fraternal,
Yeah.
okay. And you're the baby. So when you say 4, 2 daughters, then the twins,
Yeah.
and you're one of those
Yep.
2 twins.
Yeah.
And I didn't know, because I remembered you talking about your father, and I think it must have been when we were at uni, but I assumed that he had become a quadriplegic.
Yeah, people do,
Of course,
actually.
right?
People have the story that they go, you must have been adopted, or, maybe it was late in life. No, he was 24. He was in a car rollover. Interestingly, Mum was the head nurse on the spinal unit, but she was overseas when he was in hospital. So it was only when he got discharged after about 9 months that she came back, and he had to go to a meeting, and Sir George Bedbrook at the time, who's head of the spinal unit, asked sort of if they could travel together. And there you go. Yeah.
And there you go.
There you go.
There you go. So how long were they married for?
They were married for, I got to figure this one out, probably 35 years, maybe nearly 40 years. Dad died 17 years ago now. Mum died about 5 years ago. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Forgive my ignorance around quadriplegia, but for me that was a long time to have lived with quadriplegia, or is that just a misunderstanding?
No, it's a good question. Yes, yeah, probably. I think he was nearly 70 at the time. The care is obviously very good. Quality of life goes downhill a lot, and injury is hard to recover from. So you get the sort of smallest whack in your knees, but with a wheelchair or something, you hit a wall, and there's no circulation, so it's hard for that to heal. And he fell a lot, and consequently the scar tissue, those sorts of things. He started having seizures in his later life.
Right.
So, yeah, but he just did not feel sorry for himself for a single day. He used to just call himself the luckiest man in the world all the time, because he had, the family that he did. And when he got older, it was really interesting. We were all, the 4 of us were like, oh man, what are we going to do? Like, Mum can't look after him anymore, and get carers in during the day, but it's sort of hard, 24/7. And it became a real dilemma, because his, quality of life was so, he had been able to, thanks to Mum, live a really good quality of life. And then Christmas Day, he came over. We had Christmas at our house, and I had, I think, a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old at that point. There was a lot of other grandkids running around. Everyone, all 4 of us, came back from the different parts of the world and the country that we were. He ran around bumping with his elbow, bumping the stereo up the whole time, and then he just said, "This is the best day of my life." And he went home and he died in his sleep.
Oh, come on.
So, yeah, so you just kind of got to just have there's this incredible gratitude for the fact that he didn't have to, go into care or deteriorate. So, yeah. So, yeah, not a sad story, my dad's life. He was incredible.
I think I remember when I've sort of got to pause, because I go, okay, that's really amazing, very beautiful, and the life, you can feel the life in him, right?
Uh-huh.
And when you shared about it at uni, I really got who your dad was. I feel like who your dad was, and I don't know enough about your mum yet, but who your dad was, like you said, was such an impactful person, this very unusual physical circumstance, this particular attitude to life that most well-bodied people don't have. Yeah. Where do you think he got that attitude from, and what do you think it did for you girls in terms of what decisions you made?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it really is, not really at the time, but when I look back, one of the reasons that psychology was always fascinating to me, right? Because it's just this window that you choose to view the world from. Like, it's everything. If that's going to be a little black or a little hard or a little bit, rigid, then life will be impacted accordingly. So I don't know, with Dad, I think he was clearly pretty determined. He used to do a lot of running, long distance running and swimming and sport and
Okay.
things. He, I think when he had the accident, he became really clear that there's two pathways here. One is that your life's over, and two is that you just figure out another way to do things.
Right.
And so he was an only child, and his mum sort of was waiting for him to kind of move home so that she could spend her life dedicated to caring for him.
Yes.
And he just didn't go home. He just moved out. He's like, I just got to figure this out, you know.
Oh, wow.
Moved in with a friend. So I think he probably always had that, but I think that
Yeah.
was really tested, you know. And it's one of the things that is a real theme in my life. The people that I learn from a client perspective, clinically, or leaders in coaching or family or personal challenges, every single thing comes down to what do people do when life gets hard.
Yeah.
To me.
Yeah.
There's just that moment. I think in many respects, almost like a massive part of the quality of life comes down to what do you choose to do
Yes.
when things get hard.
Yes.
And, you know, clearly I don't meet a lot of people unless things are hard. And you just get
True.
to see the different kind of pathways that they take out of that. And it's a masterclass in human resilience. It's just incredible. Yeah.
So hence when you comment on the honour of working with people, the beauty you see, and the first beauty was that spirit of your father, right?
Yeah, and that was the same with him, you know, like he used to have this saying, we with swimming, we had a towel and it had, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And he was just like, he used to say that to us before we went out to race and stuff. And so amazing influence. Nothing stopped him. He taught us all to surf. He drove down to the beach and we all had to go out and do our thing and run in and get a little update from the car about no, and then run out again and that sort of thing.
Yes.
So I think that was a really strong early theme, and I feel really, you know, lucky for that.
Yeah.
In so many ways.
I wonder if what did your mum say about why she was attracted to your father? Was it his spirit? Was he a handsome fellow?
Don't know. I mean, your dad, I just don't know if you think that way about your dad, but probably, you know. I don't know. He was quite decisive, you know, like I think he knew that he wanted to marry her literally within 6 weeks, apparently. She took a lot longer to come around, but, you know, I think they just were the essence of a really good team. I remember at Mum's funeral we were talking about, you know, obviously giving a eulogy, and I'm like, man, it's just, I almost had a shame response. I thought, I can't remember anything that was just hers, you know, like that you sort of say, oh,
wow.
my mum was an amazing tennis player or whatever. Everything was what she did for everybody else, you know. My mum was, you know, she was helping with swimming club stuff. She was on the board at school. She was on the parents' society at school. She was on the fundraising club here and there. She was, you know, she was giving people carpooling. She was having boarders out on weekends. She was helping Dad's business. She was, you know, and you just, so that's a real reflection for me as I've gotten older, and now I have 3 teenage girls as well.
Yes.
To kind of go, that was pretty selfless.
Yeah, extraordinarily selfless, right? It was something I wanted to raise with you, and I don't know how you'll feel about this question, but ever since I've met you all those years ago now, which feels like 3 years ago, and it was 17 years ago, the one thing that I thought was, I think Peter's a bit too busy. Now, I reflected on that, and I'm very good at telling other people they're doing something that I'm doing, right? So I'm very good at projecting. And I looked at that and I thought, there's something there for me to look at.
Yeah.
And I'll talk more about that maybe around exploring it over the last few days. But one of the feelings I've had with this extraordinary father, who I would have very much liked to meet, and turns out actually maybe even more extraordinary mother, what has the burden been from that? Because in your story, in Performance Story, you said worrying that it's never enough.
Yeah.
And I thought, does Peter get to enjoy the difference she's making, or is nothing ever enough?
Yeah. It's a sobering point Probably not. I'm not. It's just nowhere near enough. It's not a pure science what we do, and sometimes you only know that years after the event. But certainly we were raised with just giving back, stretching yourself. I don't think even now it was in an unhealthy way, although the sport influence at the time, that I grew up was probably a bit more of the school of push yourself way too hard. But, there was certainly humility was really important, I mean, I think having 3 siblings is the same, right? You win a medal and you're on your way home from the final session and you vaguely look at it in your bag and, you're up yourself, like all that sort of stuff. And you go, yep, okay, done, or if you got one being a twin as well, kind of meant maybe your sister didn't but we were always, it was always about, there's always an internal kind of drive to keep doing better and to not accept, not rest on your laurels. You've never made it. Yeah.
We, Danielle and I were talking about, I think the last time she and I spoke was about when I changed my LinkedIn post about doing a speech that I had a couple of weeks ago. And I said, if you want to come, if you know me, and Ash McGrath got hold of me and said, no. Because she'd already told me cut that modesty out, right? And we were talking about the fact you've got a family culture, but also we live in a culture that does not self-promote, right? Like tall poppy, you got tickets on yourself, like you said, you think you know what doesn't stink. So very strong combo happening, even if things are amazing. I suppose the thing for me is I get that sense that you have, but I personally, selfishly would like you to, 2 things. One, really enjoy what you've done. Like, do you ever celebrate what you've already done and how many people you've helped? And like, do you ever pop a bottle of champagne and go, oh my God, look at Performance Story, or look at what I did with Bob, or does that ever happen?
I have to say absolutely never. Sometimes I'll feel relief if I feel like someone's done something really huge for them or they've had this breakthrough that was important. My partner starts every single day, like just after he's left, whatever, on the way to work, or he'll send me you'll change the world today. And it's so lovely. And every day I'll say, oh, no, I just, this and I'm meeting and I'm not sure I handle that very well. And I, and I'm not just being modest. I just think that it's just up to other people to figure out how impactful that was. And sometimes you'll get a sense of it and mostly you won't. And, And the other interesting thing is when I am in the room all the time doing one-to-one work, I really love it, and then I get like, I want to get out. So I start accepting, more speaking sort of things, and I'll do them and done sort of national workshop series and stuff around the place, and then I get so sick of being, gosh, you must do it more than me, but like the energy and you love it, but I can't even go to a restaurant at night in wherever I am because I'm so sick of hearing the sound of my own voice and so sick of thinking that, everyone asks a question and I've got the answers and I just want to kind of curl up a little bit. It starts to feel really uncomfortable and then I want to just get back in the room with people and then after a while I just want to get back out again.
Right?
So,
Yeah, there's so much there. I remember them talking about how human nature is to want to be with people and then we get tired and anxious so we want to be on our own and then we get lonely and depressed and we want to be with people. Actually, it was sexier than that. They said we want excitement and then there's too much excitement so we want to go home. It's kind of like the professional version of that.
Yeah.
Jerry Seinfeld, who I have many different thoughts about, positive and negative, and who I had the best sex dream of my life with.
No, really?
Extraordinary. It took me months.
I saw him recently. I assume you...
Did you see him as a comedian on stage?
Yeah.
So he does this line, and I don't know if he did it in the show you saw, but he says, everyone had to come out to get here, right? And that was a total pain, and you had to organise with your friends, and you're sitting here going, how long are you going to talk for? Because I want to go home. And he goes, we're all just trying to get home,
Yeah.
But it's true. That's kind of what you're saying, right? So my version of what you're talking about is I don't do much training anymore.
Okay, yeah.
And it's for exactly the reason you said, in terms of just the pure energy needed. Often the kind of training I was doing, certainly historically as a contract trainer, it felt like enormous effort for not enough reward in the way contract training was set up, long days or weeks or whatever. We do a bit different now at Discern. But the other thing I realised recently, I had it that it was just my own sort of anxiety and social anxiety resistance to how effective I thought it was. But I actually realised it was only probably last week that I thought it's not just that has me not want to be in a room with small groups, is that I'm very alert to energy.
Yeah.
You know when people call themselves an empath and you're like, you're the biggest wanker I've ever met. Like they're often together.
I want to put sticks in my eyes every time I hear that.
I'm actually an empath, Peter.
Yeah.
So I'm a total asshole and selfish and all these other things, but I do actually believe it's true that I very much pick up on the energy that's around.
Yeah.
I always say I feel porous.
Okay.
Which suburb did you grow up in?
Trigg.
Ah.
Yeah.
Trigg would have been more normal than it is now. It would have been a beachside, normal.
Yeah, absolutely. It was lovely. But it is, the training does get like that. I think you don't have so much of an equal exchange with people energy-wise. You try to give a lot for a lot of reasons, and and it's valuable, but I still, like, even, the way that, we've set up Performance Story, is a lot more focused on meeting the need when it is there, rather than, somebody deciding in, July that in February we'll have a course on X, and may or may not be of interest to people at the time, or they may or may not have had other things happen on the day that make them able to engage. So, it takes a lot of energy.
When we talked about Performance Story, you and I, when we caught up, that idea of meeting the need where it was and meeting it usefully for the person is so satisfying for me, because I'm really one of those all about the outcome people. Like, what are we doing this for? Sorry, what's the point? And so, I really agree. And then in training, a bit like you said, I've once in a blue moon, and it really is once in a blue moon, because after you've trained someone, it's very unusual that you'd run into them again, particularly in my old contract training life. Once in a blue moon, someone had run into me on the street. I had one girl in the centre of Perth, and she goes, hello. And I said, oh, hello. And she said, you don't know me, do you? And I said, I think I know your face, but I'm a trainer. So, and she goes, you ran a session with me, and I've used so much from it. You really changed my life.
That moment is like,
it's like heroin, isn't it? Like, I haven't tried heroin, but I think, right?
Particularly compared to all you really have is a gut hunch and a feedback form, right? And a feedback form, if you've done well, it might not be an awesome rating on the day, because people are so busy processing stuff or realigning their MO based on information that they've gotten. And, so...
You've just highlighted a weakness of mine as a trainer. I was sharing with Danielle in one of our other recordings, the want to be get stuff right, not get it wrong, the want to be popular, the want to be liked has, as a trainer, has had me, I think, a lot weaker than I could have been in terms of making a difference.
What do you mean by weaker?
I think... I don't want anyone, particularly when I was a contract trainer and your next gig was based on your evals. It was all based on the evals. You had to turn the eval out. So it felt too risky to challenge someone to the point where they might give you a not good eval. And I can't say in hindsight what I could have done, because I'm not there now, but I feel like it's been a weakness. I've actually got 2 subcontractors working with me now. The business is going well enough, thank you God, and they're teaching me things because they're coming in from external. The client is not their client. We're their client. So they come in fresh. They come in with not the level of concern of losing the client. And they're teaching me angles to approach one of these long clients we've had, where I go, oh, yes. And actually the last one who spoke to me, I said, right, I'm going to go back to my crew that I've been working with for a couple of years, and I'm actually going to be quite straight with them around what I think might not be working and what they can do about it.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Takes courage though.
Yeah, because
or discomfort first, whatever the case.
you commented on that on International Women's Day. You said you need to you didn't say it like this. I always paraphrase people terribly, and you're here so you can fix it. Breno Brown can't fix it.
If I remember, yes.
It'll right?
Yeah.
So if it's close enough, fine, but otherwise fix it. So you said you have to, if you want to grow or learn, you have to feel okay with the discomfort of that process. You didn't use the word pain, but you said discomfort, being okay with that feeling.
Yeah.
It's so uncomfortable. It's so Brené Brown was talking about it the other day. She was talking about staying with the feeling of discomfort. For me, it's actually, I described it once when I was talking to Danielle like icky. It's kind of there's a vulnerability, a risk of humiliation, a feeling of shame can come up while I'm trying to stretch into something new.
Yeah.
And being able to stay with that. I think once you've seen the magic on the other side, you have the lesson of that was worth it.
I think, when I said earlier that moment of what you do when things are hard or there's discomfort, because you're right, there is this overwhelming desire to create comfort, right?
Yeah.
So, you might blame someone, you might minimise what they've said because it makes the comfort, invalidating that, puts you back in a comfortable position. You might drink, sleep, avoid, procrastinate, like whatever that is. But, you sometimes think, okay, imagine you sat with this discomfort. And I have a couple of clients at the moment who are, obviously dealing with incredibly difficult things in the clients that I am thinking of at the moment. And there is such a temptation literally to dissociate, to not remember, to do something just and it's so automatic that it doesn't even feel like a choice. It's just like it's going to just divert to a point of lesser tension. Then you kind of go, okay, like you get to that point of discomfort and it's awful, and then you sit with it for another 5 seconds and it's awful. And sit with it, and as you said, you literally decompensate, you literally undo everything, every barrier that you've put up, and I'm like, then what? Like, is the sky going to crack open? Are you going to cry? And so what? Are you going to? So we have this absolutely repelling desire not to get to that point of discomfort or to find a way out of it. But you've almost then got to say, well, what? Like what? Why? What's going to happen next? Are you going to melt into a pile on the floor and never get up?
I think you think you're going to die. You may know you're not going to physically die, but I think your ego or whatever part of you that can't cope or feels like it can't cope, that inability to be with just what's happening and feel the pain and be in my body, not try and analyse it away, it's been probably the tragedy of my life in terms of the amount of time lost.
Yeah.
And now I'm having a really good time, and I'm 50, and I made terrible choices historically around lots of things, but when that particular point, it's only been in really recent times that I'm able to be with the pain and go through to the other side. And I can think of one night I used to get very, very anxious before training, horribly anxious, and I'd wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and I thought it was anxiety. It was only in hindsight, it was about what I was saying before, that I was very resistant. I thought this is not a good use of my time, but I wouldn't look at it.
You wouldn't,
So I was just frightened.
Yeah.
So I've realised, and I spoke with Danielle about I got very anxious the other day and was able to sit with it, and I thought, I just don't want to be responsible for the choices I've made, so I'm feeling anxious.
Yeah, wow.
What a surprising choice. It feels terrible to feel anxious. I'm an expert at anxiety. It feels the worst.
Yeah.
But I was choosing it over looking at my choices for the week, what work was, and the discomfort of, I own that. That's right.
Yeah.
So this one night we were back in Hilton, Andy and I were first together. I'm lying in bed. I wake up at 4 o'clock like normal, and I started to do my analytical spiral. Why are you even nervous? You've done this 1,000 times. You're a good trainer, right? And I went, don't do that. Feel the fear.
Yeah.
And I sat there, and I have never felt anything like it in terms of the level of emotional and physical pain. And I thought, I can't keep feeling this. I can't. And I thought, no, I'm sick of this cycle I'm stuck in. And it was so awful. And then it started to dissipate, kind of like that. Yeah. And as it dissipated, I thought, okay, I've faced it, and I never from that point again got that level of fear.
Yeah, wow.
Right?
You just did something different with it when you had it there.
Mm.
People think that they have to do a lot more than that, but as you said, that is the absolute hardest part, is sitting there. A quote I had on the fridge a lot for the kids growing up is the walls of fear are paper thin, you know, just that sense that, yeah, it looks like a massive wall and it's really like one of those footy banners, right?
Right.
You know, once you just decide to do that.
Behind you, it's a tiger. In front of you, it's a kitten. That's the one I use.
Yeah.
And Sam Harris I love Sam Harris. I love Waking Up, particularly his app. And he shares these taker moments. And his taker moment the other day was that you feel like you're in a jail, you're looking through the bars, but then you realise the bars are behind you. Mm. And I haven't expressed it anywhere near as articulately. It's so funny. I can't say articulately as I'm articulating.
Yeah.
But it had a physical effect on me when he said it. I had a boyfriend years ago, and he said to me once, Tamara, you've built a cage and you don't know the door's open behind you.
Yeah.
He wasn't a boyfriend that said many profound things.
Yeah.
But that one was...
Yeah. Well, I'm going to call it that he was worth it for that.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was worth it for lots of things. He was a nice fellow. I'm glad he wasn't for me.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, no, there was a lot nice about him. And yeah, that thing he said to me at the time, of course, I was like this, whatever, buddy.
Yeah.
I was in it. I was like, what door? I'm at the bars
exactly.
at the front, you know. So, I wanted to, you and I very naturally go into this kind of conversation, which I adore and would do for 12 solid hours with you. But I want people to hear more about Peter the Peter, right? Yeah. So Peter Bennett is this little kid, grows up in Trigg. You got your sister and you got two older sisters as well. What school did you go to?
Went to Dean Moore Primary School, had a little brown seahorse on the shirt, and then St Mary's.
Karina.
Yeah, not far. So, so great, awesome education. Loved it. Got into everything.
Yes.
You know, parents were involved in everything, so it was great.
Your father was sporty before he became unwell. Unwell's not the right way to say quadriplegia, is it? Before he became disabled?
Yeah, disabled, yeah.
Was he able to do anything physical after he did become disabled?
No, we did drag him out to sea once after the national surf titles. The next day, we went. He said, I'm never going to complain, but just one more wave. He said. So we dragged him out the back, on his back, and put him on a wave. Surfed in with him. So happy and excited that we sort of forgot to turn him over when we so we oh God, hang on. He hasn't turned over.
He's got to breathe.
But no, he couldn't do anything physically. Yeah,
okay.
He could walk a little when we were younger because he's an incomplete tetraplegic, which means significantly damaged cord at a really high level, but some feeling through it, and that just deteriorated a lot and quickly. So I think he sort of had two walking sticks. I vaguely remember when we were born.
Oh, wow.
But, yeah, it was a chair and then an electric wheelchair by the time we were sort of early primary school, yeah.
So he's sporty before that. Was your mum sporty as well?
No.
So were all four girls sporty? Because this is like an alien planet to me that I admire.
Really?
Yeah, I watch the football with great love and joy, and I watch the football and I always think of the men running around like horses. They look like beautiful stallions. I also have to remember most of them are young enough to be my children, as I have unholy thoughts. Some of them could be my grandchildren, really, on a good day.
On a good day.
Your middle daughter is the number one draft pick for North Melbourne.
She was this year for AFLW. She's been over there, since February. So she's looking forward to the season starting.
So have all your children got your sporting thing, all three of them?
Well, their dad is a world title holder, a sprinter as well.
Oh.
So I ran, he swam, I swam, he ran I was a psychologist, he's a physio, so
It all comes
so
together.
there's they didn't have half a chance really,
It
but
actually
they
makes
love it.
it makes
Yeah,
me feel better because then I go, well, it's all just in the genetics,
yeah.
because my mum and dad, my mum always says, oh, I'm sorry. My mum is very uncoordinated. I'm also uncoordinated and Sam is uncoordinated. So we say that I think he calls grandma the clumsy ninja queen and then
Oh,
I'm unco woman and he's
uncool.
Bruce boy.
Oh,
Yeah.
there you go.
We encourage him to be sporting because as I grew up, I was told over and over, you're bright, but you're terrible at sport.
Oh.
In year 8, now you can just be my psychologist just for 5 minutes. I was in year 8 and the sports teacher said to someone else, is that girl in the special class, as we used bad language back then?
We
And
did.
they said, no, she's the Ducks of year 8. And she goes, well, she's not the Ducks of volleyball. I
Oh,
couldn't serve,
there you
Peter.
go.
It would go everywhere but over the
Yeah,
net.
I know. I tell you a secret. People imagined that because of sporting background and the two sports that I did okay in, that I'm good at all sports, but my hand-eye coordination could technically make me eligible for the NDIS. Absolutely. So when people are like, no, you must be good at everything. I'm like, it's got to be a really, really big ball. Netball was fine. But anything that required hand-eye coordination, I literally was just a Gumby. So I get it. I get the sort
You
of the
actually
skill
don't
kind of
realise
piece.
how healing that is for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you clearly look very fit, clearly look after yourself, and the fact that you're not good at the thing I'm also not good at
Yeah.
is very nice for me. Thank you.
Yeah, you would definitely feel even better if we played a game of tennis together or something like that. Yeah.
But I can't play because of my knees.
Oh.
We're going down a whole world now. Let's come back out.
We are.
Right?
Yeah, let's not go there.
What do you do now for sport? What do you do for exercise?
Life is full and routine is hard, so I just do whatever I can. So I tend to gym maybe 5 days a week. I'll go like before 5 in the morning, before kids.
Before 5?
Kids, sports drop off before school, things like that. So just run or just do weights or a class or a cycle class, or I'm actually, as long as I am moving out of my head and into my body.
Yes.
And persisting beyond the point that something is hard. I'm happy. Yeah.
Do you have it? You must have it like, I would like to exercise, that feeling of I would like to exercise.
It's worse than that. It's everyone in my family gets, and the kids now too, super cranky if they don't exercise.
Got it.
Even school holidays, they'll feel gross just sort of sitting around for a bit, and they'll be like, oh, I'm going for a run, So it's it's a nice sort of knowing, how to relax or not do it, but also you sort of can't wait till you can get back to it.
Yeah. I'm happy to say that after many years of not knowing what you're talking about, I got into a routine a couple of years ago of swimming and got to the point, I really love swimming. My hair doesn't love swimming, so we have a bit of a problem there. But I got to the point where I'd wake up and go, I want to go for a swim. And I was like, this is this thing people talk about.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
And now I've got it because I've been doing borderline miraculous for me. I've been doing yoga. This is a bit of a spoiler because one of my best girlfriends is an exceptional yoga teacher on the East Coast, and I wasn't going to tell her about it until I saw her in October, but I've been doing yoga every morning since April.
Oh, wow. What do you notice?
So I held a lot of happiness in my hips.
Mm-hmm.
You know when people say trauma comes out of your body?
Yeah.
So it turned out there was heaps of happiness caught in my body. And so when I was stretching my hips, and I've got a beautiful massage therapist who I'm going to interview here and yoga teacher, she does a stretching lab with me and she stretches my hips. And there's all this joy caught in my hips.
Wow.
I didn't know you could.
I
I
did
thought it
not
was
know
all
that
bad
either.
stuff stuck
No.
in your muscles.
No.
No, it's in my hips.
I thought you were going to say hip flask then. I'm like, yeah, I get that.
That's a whole other approach.
Yeah, it is.
Actually, you've just made me think. A fellow that you're connected to and I'm not wrote on LinkedIn the other day, and he's got bipolar 1 and he said medicated and happy. His byline might even be
I
that.
saw that, yeah.
You commented and then I commented and you commented about how, why would people, again, terrible paraphrasing, why would people not use support that's available? People use alcohol and this and that. And I was thinking about it, and then I commented to your comment, which was my sneaky way of not making it too public but testing the waters, talking about being medicated myself. And it's probably been the last area that I feel okay to talk about. Even as I talk to you, I go, oh, I don't know about this, but I will anyway. So, you know, I have a history of anxiety and depression. It runs through the family. It's been a thing, and at different times a very big thing. And I find that a low dose of a couple of things is very, very good
Yeah.
for me being able to be in this
Yeah.
birth. So
What's the hesitation in talking about it? You think people still have
yes.
views around that being
I
some
actually
sort
don't
of...
know what they really think, but the concern is a combination of failure. Why couldn't you figure that out another way? Oh, I had another boyfriend. I actually thought he was going to be my husband, but I ended up marrying, luckily, another fellow. But when I was with him, it was the first time I'd fallen in love.
Yeah.
I was 27 the first time I fell in love, and I just thought, what is this magic?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, he ended up becoming a yacht blogger, and I've got to tell you about that. But anyway, he said to me when I was with him, and I had anxiety and depression at the time, I was living in Scotland where he's from, he said, why don't you go and get some help, maybe get some medication? And I said, oh, no, I can do it myself. And he said, how many years have you been saying you can do it yourself? And I said, oh, 10.
Yeah.
And I first had anxiety when I was about 8, but, you know, as an adult, about 10. And he said, well, that's not very loving to yourself. And it was kind of a bit of a Peter line for me. Actually, his name was Peter.
Oh,
yeah,
there you go.
Male Peter.
It was definitely a Peter line.
It was a Peter line, right? And I thought, what a logical thing to say. I'm
Yeah.
actually not being very loving. And off I toddled and got something and noticed the difference that made. And then on and off over the years, I would be on things or not, depending on where I was up to. And then I went to have Sam, my 10-year-old, and I don't think I was on anything pregnant because I think Andy was very worried about the chemical effects on the baby, which I think weren't proven, but I had to also pacify this husband of mine.
Yeah.
And whatever happened to me pregnant-wise, pregnancy was wonderful for me. Like, I got nauseous, but in every other way I was like skinnier than I've ever been, had the glow, felt good emotionally. Then I had this baby and went, oh, my God, I had not thought about this much at all. That was a very big deal for quite a long time. And then as he weaned and he decided one day, because he was a big boy and I really was proud of myself, breastfeeding I was very committed to, and I'd been able to do it for almost exactly a year. But because he was a big boy and we were trying to get him to sleep better, we added in the bottle, and he figured out very quickly that's much more efficient than my kind of dodgy one boob that could do something. Anyway, he swapped to the bottle, and for about a day I was like, oh, my baby's weaned. And the next day I was like opening champagne and ringing the doctor to get my antidepressants. And I was like, I'm back, baby. Like I say to everyone, just get through the first year, just get through the first, because that was, you know.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it's a combination of a sense of failure, a sense of embarrassment, but also because I work professionally helping people, particularly as a coach, I feel like if I give them advice, they might think, oh, well, what? You don't even know what you're talking about. You're on drugs to cope with your psychology.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, it's good that and I read that comment, that response that you made, and I don't think it changes until we all talk about that.
Yes.
You know, I think some of the attitudes around meds for depression and anxiety belong to 30 years ago, and that's fine if, you know, it may not be that people need to update themselves, but also don't kid yourself that you're updated, that we know that there are so many different types. You know, most recent research is suggesting at least 6 clear types in terms of the impact on the brain of the types, and some of those are inherently biological and people will respond really well to that.
yes.
And I had a really profound experience of that in a couple of ways. You know, so I was on meds myself for probably more than a decade.
Yeah.
Have a family history.
Okay.
Always been able to kind of manage it. It was not sort of significant. It was more just like a tendency, I think, to sort of get a little more sort of self-critical and or flat, but certainly not something that materially impacted life. But yeah, very conscious of the fact that I had all the risk factors with a strongish family history and you know, perfectionistic tendencies and ex-sport and all of those sorts of things.
Yes.
In 2005, I had a 1 in 800,000 epidural complication.
I remember.
Went in and just didn't walk properly again for maybe 5 years, I want to say. had maybe 20, close to 30 different hospitalizations over time. It was not, as you know, the stats indicate, it was not common at all.
No.
And it just absolutely broke me. They very early on, when they realised that, I was still in hospital after Ella was born, very early on, the neurologist, who was exceptional, he just said, like, we're going to have to significantly centrally depress you, right? Because it's spinal cord damage and it's firing its pathways, so you can't just, like do something for the knee or something for the back, or it's... So the only way to stop what they call the overexcitement in the brain, which is effectively the same as, schizophrenia or,
Yes.
in terms of the sort of the screwy nerve signals, was to just generally depress it so that it wouldn't send that signal.
Wow.
He gave me a number of different, sort of options. And anyway, so he said, we're going to start heavy with the depressants because it's the only way is to sort of break the cycle before it becomes permanent. Said, do you need antidepressants? And I'm thinking family history, all of that, risk factors that I indicated. I said, no, I think I'll be fine, but I'll let you know.
Yes.
Meds were increased. Like it was really hard for me to see while I was in it, right? And we know this. We know
Yes.
that people who struggle with anxiety and depression, when they're actually in it,
Yes.
it's incredibly hard to see because our brains are designed to slowly just recalibrate and adjust. And so, I think, if you go into a room and it's dim or it's, you kind of go, oh, that's pretty dim in here. After 5 minutes, you sort of forget that it was dim until someone
Yes.
else walks through the door and says, oh, it's dim in here. And you
Yes.
go, oh, yeah, that's right. Or until you go back out again. So the brain goes, this is unusual. And then, oh, yeah, that's now the new normal. And so I'd go back to the neurologist. He'd say, how's the mood going? And I'm like, I can't sleep. I'm in chronic pain. 85% of people in chronic pain end up with depression.
Yes.
It's hard to look after 2 small children at that point that I had. Hard to work, couldn't exercise, which is a major coping strategy. It was just incredibly difficult. And I said, no, I think I'm okay. I'm like, oh, I think it's just tiredness. Oh, I think it's just grief. Oh, I think it's just, and the pain itself was remarkably difficult. It was, and so meds went up, got to the point where anytime there was a loud noise in the background, like a door, or a kid screaming, running down the hallway, or something being dragged on the floorboards, or the kids next door on the trampoline, anything like that, I was like, oh, which is classic serotonin kind of
Yes.
stuff. And, I got to the point I woke up one morning, we were going to Broome on holiday, hanging out for warm weather, the kids, mum was coming and she, helped with the kids, and it was just waiting for this day for 6 months. And I woke up and I just went, I just can't do it. It's too hard. It's too, what if she doesn't sleep on the flight? What if, it was all these small sort of things that were landed in Broome on the tarmac, and called the neurologist and went, now's good.
Okay, let's do it.
And so, obviously over the years afterwards, when surgical interventions were more helpful, I came off, the depressants in terms of the antidepressants, in terms of the depressants reduced. But, yeah, look, I just remember what an incredible difference that made literally overnight. And you can't make that decision for yourself to significantly reduce your quality of life because you fear something. I'm always just saying, look, you get to just try it, and it's totally your call. And obviously most people don't need it, but those that do, you just kind of go, you wouldn't deny yourself any other medical treatment.
That's right. I think it's that. I think it's understanding. I've had a broken leg. That sort of, it's now become a bit of a cliche, but it's such a world, right? Because I knew you when you had that issue, and because of how extraordinary you are, you would comment on it because at one point you were wearing a patch on your foot.
Yeah, a long time.
And I remember
lignocaine and ketamine. Yeah.
Okay, so I said to you one day, when we were at Vital Conversations and we were just having a chat, and I said, what's your kind of pain like? And you said, oh, it can be 9 out of 10. And I was like, that can't be right, because you are operating a business, you have children, you have a husband, you have a life, you never complain, and you're in this extraordinary level of pain. Like, I don't think you know who you are. And I would actually, the one request I have of you, actually, without being too bossy, is you don't have to celebrate if you don't want to, but I'd like you to. I'd like you to do something actually pretty big, to really celebrate who you are for people. I, of course, have ideas. Feel free to discuss later. But the other thing that I would like selfishly, that I think other people would also like, is I think sometimes when I have tried to compliment you, you don't rudely rebuff it, but I don't feel like you're really getting it, and it's a little bit dissatisfying. So I get, if I want to jump up and down, I can be a bit much. But when I say, oh, Peter, I just wanted to thank you, I don't want to hear why it wasn't enough, what else you could have done, that I got there myself. Like, I really want you to take it and understand whatever's going on for you psychologically around things being never enough. I don't want you to take away from other people's joy when they want to tell you just how incredible you are.
Thank you. I will work on that. I think I heard Adam Grant, recently say, if somebody gave you a gift, you wouldn't go, nah, take it back. And so thank you. I appreciate that. I think it does give me a sense of gratitude, and I feel it's incredibly rewarding, and I feel lucky. And I'm not saying that to sort of say it's not about anything that I do, but I feel lucky that that's the intersection point that I get to have with people's lives, and that's incredibly rewarding.
Yeah.
And whenever people say to me, God, it must be really depressing doing what you do, I literally do the Cocker Spaniel sort of thing of like, I don't understand, because I'm like, you serious? You get to see people in these incredibly intimate moments overcome challenges that they never thought that they would, and reassess assumptions that they just had never even contemplated reassessing, and all of these things. And I'm like, could you just think of a better job?
No.
You just can't. So
No.
I find it incredibly rewarding, and I think for that reason as well, I don't necessarily look for or trust that I'm going to see that in the work or the feedback, but yeah, thank you. I will take that on notice.
Yeah, please. You're not set up in any way to take it on, I don't think, from your very beginning around what's going to be good enough, keep going, your grit, your father, like, it's not set up right. But and I can really relate to what you're saying around, I feel the things I do well, I feel like they're a gift and a blessing, and I'm lucky. So if people say, oh, you're good at this or that, I'll go, oh, thanks. And my immediate next thought is, that's nothing to do with me. I'm just lucky I got these particular things that work or don't work or whatever. But yeah, there is a thing about giving someone else the joy of being able to say thank you, that made a difference to you, and thank you for telling me.
Thank you. I will try that. I will definitely focus more on that. I think the other thing is, it's just, when I say it's never done, it's not that it's not even good enough, but if I was in recruitment and I could say 85% of my got roles this week and I stayed in them at the 12-month mark, that would be a real metric. But again, it's, some of the stuff is only about what people do next time they're in a tough situation. That tells you that, wow, that was and so I think that's kind of part of it. I think the other thing in terms of kind of the motivation is, the turn against the concept of winning, right? Again, and you could use a whole lot of incredible authors' words here, but, like the infinite game kind of stuff. But it is really just about that next step. Mastery in a technical sense of the word, not as in being a master of anything, but it's really just always about that next step of mastery, like what you've learned and what you can adjust and and so, it's just It's just never done,
No, I agree it's never done, but you are bringing out a bit of a stubborn streak in me where I would like you to please at least do some celebration before you move on to the next step, because I totally get what you're saying. I totally agree.
Yeah.
But that's the big but for me, is like, please do something to recognise, even if it's just as a favour to me. You can still keep going,
Yeah,
but
thank you.
just mark it, please.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It's going to be over one day, and I'm going to wish that I had some moments that I stopped and, reflected and absorbed that.
Speaking of stopping, the thing that when I realised I was projecting onto you about, never, because this whole subject, right, I relate to, that's why I'm raising it. The drive is less, the achievement is less, the flavour's similar, right?
Yeah.
But when I was looking at it this week, I thought, I said to Danielle one other time we were talking, I said, I can watch Netflix, I can have my hair done, I can have my nails done, I can relax when there's a subject matter, but I have a swinging chair at the front of my house and it's got a leg bit. It's bliss. And I'm not allowed to sit in it because I have not done enough to sit in that chair. So this week when I was doing some self-analysis, thinking, well, you're banging on it to yourself about Peter being too busy or Peter not celebrating or Peter not taking a break. Why can't you sit in that chair? I haven't got to the answer yet. It's something to do with there's not an activity to be done, or my anxious brain can't just sit there and swing.
Needs
There's
that
something
reward.
around
Yeah,
that, right?
yeah.
But what's your version when you go, big week, I'm going to insert relaxation here? What's your version of that?
Sometimes it's writing.
Yes?
Reflecting stuff, because it feels like a luxury to visit all that's on my mind, mostly heart, I think. Sometimes that doesn't have a client or a deadline or with it. So then I'm like, I just got to do that, even though it's not going to tick a box or get sort of returned to someone who's waiting for it. Sometimes it is just incredibly simple things. It's reading the paper after breakfast, and just not rushing straight onwards. Sometimes it's cuddling the puppy.
That's so funny that you've got a puppy.
Yeah.
Have you got a puppy or a
No,
dog?
he's a dog.
What kind of dog is he?
He's a spoodle. Yeah, but I think, that's just tells... Yeah, it's really just permission to be in the moment. There's always a million jobs to do and then, people to visit and stuff that you're sort of lagging behind on. But for me, it's to do the thing that it's almost just not to rush. It's incredibly simple, those things that I get a lot of satisfaction out of, even just with the kids, which aren't really kids anymore, but just talking to them about stuff and just, that's not necessarily functional.
Right.
Yeah.
Just being there.
Just, yeah.
I gave the talk at Women in Mining last week and I gave the example of an old landmark thing. If you want to look at what you're committed to, look at what's in your life. And then I was listening to a meditation by Adi Ashanti on waking up and he said, look where most of your thought or attention goes to. And I shared it in the talk as a bit of a shock because I had done a previous activity with another speaker and we raised our hand for what was most important in my life, and the most important thing in my life was Sam, good mum, etc. And then I did the other exercise by Adi Ashanti and I thought, I spend a lot of time thinking about myself and work, right?
Yeah, wow.
And when you talked about being with your girls or taking a moment, because life when we're present to it is bliss, right? So I've done a lot of mindfulness training and I do it every day, and I've been able to access via that moments of, here I am with Peter having the time of my life. If I actually realise where I am in this room, it's actually happening as I say it, which often does. I go,
Nice.
look at us. Wow,
Yeah.
this is so cool, man. Like, this is amazing. And when I realised the thing about Sam, I have sort of consciously since then, being someone who's anxious about work and work-driven, think about myself a lot for whatever reason. I don't know if I'm selfish or... I think I am. I'm pretty self-involved, but I'm also really on a mission to get better and suffer less and hurt other people less and break patterns. It's kind of I think I must do a combo of self-indulgent and useful. I haven't analysed it enough to say.
Yeah.
But when you said about being with the girls, I thought, I'll stop myself and go be with Sam, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll go to put him to bed because, of course, he's 10 because I had him later. And I'll give him a kiss and I'll go, try and be present to the miracle of this child. Like, I really try and be present to the fact he's still little enough that I sit on his bed and, and it's going to be like that, right?
Yeah,
Because
it
your
is.
girls have done super fast, haven't they?
Yeah, nearly 21, 18 and nearly 14. Yeah.
Right. And is it true the thing high school goes like a blur? Do they speed up in high school? Their age is getting older.
I
Did you
think
notice?
so, but it's just always been a lot going on anyway, right? Between, the three of them, everyone's there's always someone between me and them, and that is, and before you deal with that thing and then you look back and the rest of it's moved quickly while you've been in it. But yeah, I think just being in that moment kind of stuff, some of the things that are the most rewarding for me and moving. Even this week, there's this man in the gym. He's probably 80s, I reckon. It just shuffles in. He's there every morning, super early when it opens. Got his crease pressed in his shorts. His hair's perfectly combed. He's just... And, a couple of times I kind of went, I wonder what his sort of story is. And I would see him sort of get up when people went near him, like, oh my gosh, am I in the way sort of stuff. Did you, super polite seeming gentleman. And then I realised he just wanted to engage with them. It's just his way of engaging with it. And then I'm like, I wonder if he's got like a wife at home and they've been married like 60 years and she winds his short. Anyway, I just actually had a proper chat to him for the first time this week. And because people walk past quite often with their headphones on and they're like, oh, no, mate, you're good, but they just keep walking. And I just wanted to cry when I got in the car afterwards because he was he's like, oh, bless you. You're such a lovely lady, whatever. And like, I just spoke to this guy for, I don't know, like a minute and a half. And I just thought, like, what are we doing?
What are we doing?
What are we doing that somebody is so joyful and appreciative and full of gratitude that they had a conversation with someone? And I wanted to cry, actually, but it wasn't sad crying. It wasn't devastating crying. It was just moving. That like there's just something about that moment that I want to remember.
Yeah, that what are we doing piece. I think there's this illusion that we live in and we run around, and depending on where we are, we're affected by I call it the collective conscience. I'm sure it's the wrong term. It's basically what are we all doing here? So, as we run around in our Western world and live our lives, and the pace is sort of set. And I know that Perth is very relaxed. I think if we transplanted ourselves to New York, my head would explode how fast it is. But I think this is fast and what everyone's doing is fast. And, we've joked before about how busy everyone is. Danielle and I have joked about it and other clients, so busy. And then this old fellow, saying, you're such a nice lady. And I think there's a lot of nice ladies, right? But to two things. One, to stop and be aware. There's an old fellow there that no one ever talks to. I wonder what's going on. But secondly, to take the action. I think I think most people are very well intentioned. I don't know that most people are thinking a lot about other people or making a difference to other people, but I think push come to shove, they would do the right thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think so too.
And then they're just distracted, aren't they?
And I think that's right. And it doesn't matter whether you're in, Bunbury or New York City. I think ultimately the busyness is in our heads, and it's in the ability to feel everything and not have the silence. Obviously, social media is the primary one there, and just to be constantly scrolling all the time, and it doesn't make people happy. I feel good that it doesn't make people happy. I'm like, you can say it makes you happy, but you keep doing it, it does not make you happy.
It does not make you happy.
And your brain knows that it's not the right thing for it and you could disguise it all you like by, oh, I was just connecting with a friend, and oh, I was just ordering something, so then it's done and I don't have to go out to the, but the reality is you just filled that space. And I notice, whether it's therapeutically or in the performance coaching space or specifically around teams and leadership, the power of taking that reflective space to say you've got 10,000 data points, right, coming in between literally your financials and your emails and your social media and your people you pass in the corridor and all that sort of stuff. And then when we talk with people, they're not that, obviously we're pretty much thinking kind of half sentences a lot of the time. So when people say, oh, anyway, and then so last week was, well, and they'll stop and I'll go, no, what?
Yeah.
And they'll go, oh, confusing, actually. It was a different week. Okay, tell me about that. So actually just the stopping or the pausing and the countercultural reflective space to have that ability. So if you can do it through mindfulness and things, great, but it's kind of so true that until we have to find some things to put words to and we're forced to follow that thread and see what that's leading to, and then what that's leading to, and then go, that thing there that I didn't even have my eye on, that's driving all of these things that I do every day.
Yeah.
And so we're not really changing anything. Sure you do, and you give people skills and strategies, but just even taking the space to go follow that thing back there.
Yes.
And say, oh, all these things are motivated by the idea that you shouldn't have got the job in the first place. Maybe we should have that conversation, so I think that's what's really encouraging, the fact that I felt peaceful, and I think he felt peaceful and or gratitude just in that human to human moment.
And how big one moment can be, right? The reverberation of that. So you said it was like a minute and a half. He feels seen, he feels loved, he feels like he exists. You're touched by the moment, and it'll reverberate for him, right? So it doesn't matter how long it was. It was like, oh, that lady came and talked to me and showed interest in me, and it's interesting when you say about if something's worrying me, when you said following the path back to what, I have to kind of get there to let something really shift. I have to go, what is the real thing going on? And until I figure it out for myself, I can't let it go, right? I can't let it go. Other people I think can, but for me, I really need to work through what is so I'll give you, it's a very personal one, but I'll give you one that was quite amazing. So there's a lady who now does some work with me actually under Discern, but she's also been my counsellor at times, very wise woman, lives near me up in the hills. If I remember, I'll also talk about the difference for me living in the flatlands versus the hills energetically. Anyway, one day I go and see her and I'm saying, I'm perimenopausal and that's been an exciting adventure and I'm still learning what's happening. And this particular day I go and see her, I'm floating about 3 metres above the ground, right? I'm scattered and upset. I'm like, I can't get real terrible, raving on. This, that and the other. And she says, she goes, out of nowhere, she goes, have you ever wanted to have a second child? This is months ago, not years ago, and I'm 50, right? And I go, yes. Why did you mention that? And she said, I don't know, it just popped in my mind to ask you about it. And I said, yeah, I did want to. And we were very lucky to have Sam. He was a little bit miraculous. My gynecologist, when I said to him some years later, could I have had a second? He said, does lightning strike twice, dear? But I'm also a real believer. Like if I wanted to do it, I always think I could do it, somewhat naively at times, but I don't mind having that attitude. I find it works pretty well. Anyway, she's talking about it and she says, what happened? And I said this and that. And we had this really, like you said, winding conversation.
Yeah.
And where it got to in the end, after several minutes of this, that and the other, was the thing I hadn't been able to let go of, and the reason I was still upset about it was I didn't want to be with the truth that me and my husband wouldn't have done very well having a second. And I chose not to do it because I didn't think it would work out well. And the peace I couldn't be with until that moment was admitting I didn't being okay with the fact we wouldn't have been okay. You know what I mean? It was like,
yeah.
no, I don't want to be the kind of person that wouldn't have been okay.
Yeah,
Like,
that's not part of the story that
that
I
is
was
not
planning
the
to write.
story.
Yeah.
Like, you know, people have several children. Like, look at you, you've got 3 children. You do 50 million things. You've got these 3 beautiful children, right? People can do this. So there was a sense for me of not wanting to admit what you know, it probably, who knows, but it probably was quite a good decision to do what we did, but I just didn't want to be with it.
It's interesting she knew that at some level,
Right.
that the perimenopausal kind of piece is a reminder that chapter is, you know, is what it marks really, right?
Right.
Having that conversation with yourself, yeah.
Yeah, and going, oh, I'm ashamed that we weren't good enough in the story, right? Once I got it, once I saw it, it was quite miraculous how quickly cluckiness on seeing a new baby shifted to sympathy for the parents who were holding said baby
Yeah.
and one day maybe having grandchildren.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
So that exploration. But, you know, because you work as a psychologist, you work as a coach, you work as a trainer of teams. When you coached me years ago and I shared with you afterwards, I find when you're a good coach, you often don't get much credit because a good coach, like you were for me, you helped me figure out lots of things and I thought I'd done it all myself.
Well, I could say you did, but you're right. It's giving people the space to find what that is, and I think that's the only way to work, really. I mean, you know, when people are not doing, you know, helpful things in the coaching process or therapeutic process, if they're heading down a path that's, you know, not necessarily going to be helpful, but you know, at the end of the day, only they can figure out what that is. So
Yes.
you're kind of like putting little tea light candle markers out on the path as they go, and then they're like, man, look at this. It's like, yeah, but you actually walked there. I just put the tea light candles out. So
Yeah, but the placement of them is crucial. I both love that the person sees it as their own achievement and my ego at times wants a little nod, little tip of the cap, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Particularly actually when I coach people in my personal life, I had one very funny example which I can't share for confidentiality, but it was very funny. After a very concerted and long effort to help someone, they said, oh yeah, I just didn't really have any problem with that issue.
Yeah.
I was like, oh,
yeah, funny.
can I please have that 2 years back?
I know. You know what's interesting for me, that the toughest one sometimes is you honestly just put everything into trying to create difference for people, and then someone will say, and again, you know, no judgment, and I'll probably get into trouble for this, people will say, oh, I had my crystals read at the show on the weekend. It's all good. I'm like, all right, well, yep, awesome. There's a marker, awesome. I'm like, yeah, but anyway, you just,
The crystals was the key.
Mm.
Everything that happened in the 8 months prior just led up to the point of the crystals.
The crystals, exactly. Or even you having enough optimism to try the crystals or something.
That's right. Probably
yeah.
things were connected, but actually the crystals is what made the difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a funny well, I always find the combination of love and ego fascinating, right? Because I can see both running in me. I can see both wanting attention. I can see, you know, Danielle and I have talked about before, you know, working in coaching and the satisfaction of that, or being a speaker and finding it satisfying. And there's both things at play all the time.
Yeah.
And I can really feel it. I can feel my heart and I can feel my insecurity and want of attention, and I really like acknowledging it. I think that gives me freedom.
It's good to name it. I think also we forget that there's a direct correlation between, you know, obviously psychological agility and anxiety, right? Because you're constantly open to the feedback loop that says, was that okay? Was that not okay? And, you know, we know even from personality profiling that people can only maintain an incredibly stable mood by blocking out external feedback, right?
Yes.
And so there's this flip side where you care too much about feedback, but you're looking for it, which people think is ego, but I think the construct underneath that, if you were to break, you know, ego down to different pieces, I want to know that what I'm doing is helpful. I want to know that I'm doing a good job. I want and need a feedback loop in the world to figure out if I'm on the right track.
Yes.
So I think there's there's a real health in wanting to know that and or, wanting to, yeah, you can call it ego, but I think it's just a little dopamine thing, right? It's like it's a seek and search. Like I'm trying to do this or I'm trying to connect with the person and they just said this, and that's like an animal picking up a scent. Like, oh yeah, I'm on the right track. I'm on the right track, and it's biologically, I think it's a really healthy and helpful thing to do, but it does come with that constant dance of I'm putting a whole lot of stuff through the filter here that some of which doesn't need to be churned. It shouldn't have ended up in the filter in the first place. Like we
Yes.
shouldn't have gotten to the engine room. And then the reverse, because if you talk about the toughest clients that I see,
Yes.
it's the people who quite often, it's not even people who, let's call them mandated clients or formally referred clients or strongly, they have
Strongly
an
encouraged.
indentation on their earlobes when they come in and that's fine, right? Because everybody wants something. And one thing that I have really enjoyed is the people who just did not want to be there that have really become lifelong, people in my professional circle. But I think that the hard thing is when people are not open to discomfort or angst or reflection. Yeah, and it is literally a perennial, it's an eternal human issue, right? That we develop rules for ourselves in the world so that we don't have to review everything all the time.
Yes.
Like that's red and it seems to be warm, I better not touch it, and then at some point, you'll go near something that is red and is warm but isn't hot to touch, and at some point, so it's about how many rules and assumptions have I made that can I lock in to make the world easier? Like either, I'm a good trainer or good.
Yes.
And then I can press on, or when does that become unhelpful and when do I need to review? And I think that recalibration balance is a hard one to get, and I hope we never stop wrestling with it. Really.
Yeah, I think you're right. We have to. I've looked at it in my coaching, and I have to be vigilant around continuing to keep the beginner's mind approaching each conversation with the amount of openness and generosity, not becoming rote in any way. I left, I used to do career counselling, like career transition work, and I had to stop because I had a fellow come in one day and he started telling me his story and I thought, I'm so bored, and I resigned the next day because it's too important, right? It's their life. And it had become rote and I didn't have the engagement to go to the next level of, okay, how can I look at this a different way? So that was the right decision. But because I still like coaching in general, I think about it often. I think, what's the next training I need to do? What's the reset I need to do? What's the supervision I need to have? We might have a conversation offline about that because I think there is an opportunity to continue to hone. Yeah, definitely there's an opportunity to continue to hone. I was thinking about, how I said we missed a trick and we should have put Q&A on LinkedIn. What do you want to know about Peter? You and I were talking about privately the other day the question, what would be a good question to ask you? So I've got two questions in mind. One is, what would be a good question to ask you if I wanted to know more about the whole Peter? But the other one is, when Danielle and I went out to lunch and we decided that she was going to have this miraculous podcast with herself and Grayson and have this studio available, I shared afterwards that I had this real moment of discomfort when she said she wanted to be my friend, and I was like, oh, no. And when I looked at it, because she challenged me gently and said, do you think it's about being vulnerable? And I said, absolutely, because I knew you as a trainer and as a coach, and I'm pretty awesome at that. And now you're only going to get to know the shit bits. And my beautiful husband, when I got home, I shared that with him and he goes, fancy saying that about yourself. You have no idea how wonderful you are. And it was beautiful, right? And it was really nice. It impacted me. I was like, well, that was quite a thing to say. But actually, it was the question I had for you. So you and I have a friendly professional relationship. Imagine I said to you, I want to be your friend. Let's hang out. What would there be any, apart from your choice around that, is there anything that you would be nervous that I'd get to know that I don't know about you professionally? So I've asked you two questions mashed into each other. Is there anything, if I said, let's be friends, that you go, oh, no, because you know me as awesome and now you'll know this other bit? And the other thing, I've forgotten what I said. What did I say before that?
Um,
What question should I ask you
yeah.
to
So,
find out more about Peter, the whole person?
I mean, yeah, I do. I think it's not that there's a part that would be that I wouldn't want people to see necessarily, but there's parts of you that are unhelpful to the whole. So, say, for example, when you and I were talking and you said to me, you said you did a post a while ago and it was kind of more personal and it was really nice. And, and I struggle with that because everything that I experience obviously comes through a very human lens. It's not sort of a technical, oh, when someone does this, you should do that. It's always, coming from a point of reflection and on a personal level. But at the same time, there are things that you don't want people to be thinking about when you're talking to them, right?
Yes. So one of the things we discussed that day, which was very useful for me, is you are a psychologist. I am not, and there is a charter, an expectation, and I totally get what you were saying around could sharing personal things be unuseful. Is that a word? Unuseful for my
Yeah.
clients or for people who know me professionally.
Yeah. So, and it sort of doesn't answer the question, but it's along the same trajectory, which is that, say for example, I said, my mother died, and then somebody's talking to me about their mother died.
Got it.
That then they'll start to think, oh, I shouldn't say that. She's gone forever, because that might
Got it.
you've lost your mum, and you might also
Got it.
find that. So people start sort of self-monitoring. So I think, if you have a relationship, if we had a relationship that was in a sort of a set sort of coaching or a then you kind of go, no, you wouldn't be surprised, or I wouldn't worry, because I like to think that I'm authentic and real, and I've got a list as long as Santa's list for people about what things I need to just do better with myself and work on, and other. So I would say, is it helpful for the relationship? Does it get in the way of the relationship?
Yeah.
And if we didn't have that relationship, I would say, yeah, I'm probably going to be quite the anticlimax if we hung out. And I'm not being self-deprecating. I just think that, there's just all levels of, you get frustrated with people, or you do something, all that sort of stuff that you go, oh, you've never been judgmental before, and now you've just,
those I can understand
you've
that.
just, so
I can also understand the idea of anticlimax if you're having a literal break, having a glass of wine, and you don't happen to be talking about, the things we've been talking about today, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I think for me it's more of a neurotic thing or a lack of self-esteem around, the misunderstanding around who I am and what I'm worth and all the rest. So it's like, oh no, you've seen my best bits. Now if I be like this, you're going to think I'm not so good. And in Danielle and I's conversation about it on this, when I watched it back, I was like, oh, that was fine. It's only in hindsight sometimes I'll go, oh, there is no problem there.
Yeah.
But because of my, as I would call it at times, wonky thinking, that was very, I really love what you shared when I was talking about ego, and you said, getting feedback points. It allowed me to look at that part of myself with greater compassion, and
Good.
yeah, I really liked it, and it made me realise because of that, I still have, I think I have constant anxiety. I think I'm very used to it, and I think I can operate. I have a lot of joy in my life, like those moments of joy when you go, and it's more and more and more. I go, I'm so happy I get to be alive. This is awesome, right? So I have that, and then I'm worried all the time. Like as we're having this conversation, I go, oh, I hope Peter's enjoying this. I hope it turns out well. I think I was too gushy at the beginning, but it'll probably be all right. And Grayson can edit it. I wonder if Peter's having a nice time. I wonder if Peter's having a nice time. I wonder if Peter's having a nice time. Like whatever else I'm thinking, that is rolling.
Yeah.
And that's a bit both yucky and tiring.
It is. And I think, I think you're right. And everybody, I certainly have a lot of areas of life or days where I would do the same thing. And sometimes it might help with excellence, because you're sort of, really prosecuting an idea and looking for, do I need to shift how I'm being as a result of the outcome of that thought, but I think it's also a lot of energy that, like you could just ask it once. You don't have to ask yourself 50 times,
Right.
that sort of thing.
Yes.
And then also, as we know, when people are nervous about public speaking, the more faith they put in the external environment, like she's frowning or he's on his phone, does that mean I'm boring? It's a recipe for disaster. So there's some things that, I think we can kind of go, if that's worth thinking about, let me do this properly later on, or let me
Yes.
ask properly later on, all those sorts of things.
Yes.
But as an aside, she is having a good time. It feels like, I'm just thinking, I don't know if it's been 15 minutes or
I don't know
2 hours,
either.
but just
Yeah,
kind of,
thank you.
natural
And
and real.
thanks for saying you're having a good time, because that is very nice for me to hear. And I really like when you said maybe we could think about this later and properly and not as a repetitive or insistent thought. I also have to share, because you talked about public speaking, the thing that I advise people around public speaking, I still get nervous public speaking, but I'm much less so, is putting the attention on what the crowd's going to get. I think I taught myself it, but I'm not sure. I never have found a better shift to my nerves than just having my attention on what is the point of this. And today, when I was a bit nervous about you coming, I was nervous, excited. The nerves were really about, I want this to be useful for you, and I really want to get the juice for you and for people listening. That was sort of the drive. But then I thought, just have it about Peter finding it a useful experience, and then I can kind of ground.
Everything else goes out from there.
Yeah.
So I think the second question was
what should I ask you?
What do you ask me?
Yeah, to learn more about Peter Bennett. What's your middle name?
Jane.
Peter Jane Bennett.
I think I kind of start to get into like what's holding me up. You know, I think in a way that just came to me. I'm not sure that I'm ready to answer it.
Okay, no worries.
But that was a vulnerability kind of question. I think there's a lot of things I would like to do that I hold myself up on. I put myself in situations that, probably get in the way of achieving that.
Okay.
Taking on too much that is not necessarily, either the best use of time or doesn't meet, So I had a chance, I got asked to write a book about 5 years ago. I published an article in some magazine overseas, and they're like, oh man, this is a really big topic. Would you consider writing more on it? And they literally, I'm like, oh, this is a scam. And they're sending me, sort of pre-release, deals and prepayments for time and all. Anyway, and I just, I totally sabotaged it. Like I seriously went to the point where I just didn't get back to people, and I'm like, what's that about? And every chance that I've had, including an incredibly, probably one of the brightest gentlemen that I've ever met, contacted me about 18 months ago and said, we just got to write. Like he's physics, and he's just amazing. And I just have not progressed it. It's still, and he's very sweet and checks in, oh, how you doing? And
yeah, you ready?
So there's some things that I think I'm afraid to do that I would really like to do that I need to get more on top of.
And like being able to fulfill potential dreams and what might be.
Totally.
Do you know, have you ever heard of the poet David White?
Yes.
He, when you hear someone speak I went through a phase where every word he said was life-changing for me.
Oh, wow.
And it was super beautiful. And one of the things that stuck in my mind that he said is, he's got that gorgeous voice. I wish I could impersonate it. It's like liquid silk. I just got distracted thinking, wouldn't it be nice to be, like you could be married to that fellow or spend time with him in Ireland? Oh, that happens. He said, I think most of us are we're 7 to 10 years ahead of where we're actually living. We know where we're going to be, but as we're here now, we know we're going to be there, or we even are there psychologically.
Yeah, I think that's the thing.
And so when you tell me that story, a couple of things happen for me. One is I think, oh, David White, you're doing the 17 years thing. So I think, oh, you're right. Now it's just going to be when. And the other thing that popped into my mind, which may be completely wrong, but connected to that issue you said before, it was an issue actually, when you said about, it's never enough, how can I contribute, your father's approach to life. I thought, does the writing not feel serious enough or feel contributory enough, or does it feel like it'd be just too much fun and light and you wouldn't be taking the level of responsibility you currently take?
Yeah.
So, of course, that's made up out of nothing. It could be
No,
completely
but
wrong.
it's really interesting because I didn't know how strongly I felt about that until you said it. And I think the thing that makes it hard for me sometimes to notice that I dilute myself is that is where I see the greatest impact, is writing, is where I see the greatest impact in
So
me.
you believe you could have the biggest
I feel
impact
like I
from
could
writing?
have a much bigger impact.
I
feel like there's all
agree.
these stories that, and you get this incredibly, and it's an overused word, but privileged, all the things that nobody's wanted to often say to anybody else, let alone to themselves.
Yes.
And then you do 50,000 hours of that.
Yes.
And you think, I got to write that stuff down.
Really?
I think just the observations and the things that everybody knows what was in their head, but they don't know what was in the other 49,999, And so I'm like, I do actually. I get to see that when people say, this is what happens for me when I'm alone. And I'm like, guess what?
Guess what?
It's there. You could just flick the lights on. I think,
We're all in the room.
I think in your story launch, I phrased it of you're on a lonely, dark journey and you go to pull over for the night and, you go into a clearing and you think you'll find this little dark place to lie down and there's 50,000 little lights and campers there and everyone was doing the same thing.
I know. When you've said 3 or 4 things today that have brought tears to my eyes, and I think that's what happens for me with you is I know exactly what you mean. I always say that hell is people not understanding they're connected and heaven is that they are. And when you really realise you're not alone, everyone's struggling. And then when I look at you, I just love you. Like I look at your face and I go, look at that Peta that's doing this thing. And
it's just, they're so amazing though. Like humans are all the things we spend so much time searching for. It's just there in each other, like again, airports and hospital corridors and funeral parlours, and you walk into those, like, I'm not going to swear, but it comes to mind, like that's where real is, that's where it doesn't matter what you earn, doesn't matter where you got educated, it doesn't matter how important you think you are or how busy your diary is or how fat your pay packet is. When you're in a hospital corridor, you are absolutely understanding that not a single person in the world woke up today and decided that this was their preferred place to be.
No.
And here we are. And that's when people feel connected. That's when people feel peaceful. That's when people have perspective. So
I know.
it is the most glowing, awesome feeling in the world to know that about human beings and to believe it. And I think a lot of the work that I get to do reminds me that we just have so much shit over the top of it all.
That's right.
That we can get caught up in a conversation about. And sometimes you're just stripping it back and you're kind of going like, I know you witnessed this thing and you couldn't do anything about it and you loved this person and there's nothing you can do about them suffering, and I can't think of any greater purgatory. It wasn't.
Right.
It's no more complex than that. In terms of it. So,
but see, this will be a conversation for another day, I'm sure. But I think you can do something I can't do. So when we talk about people being real and connection, I have a white hot fury regarding the corporate world. So I work in the corporate world,
yeah.
and I have I said a joke at Women in Mining, and I said I was saying, have a look at whether your work is feeding your soul, and do you really want to be there? And then I said I probably won't get asked back to Women in Mining. That's sponsored by several large companies, and I said that we are very grateful for their sponsorship, and that's kind of the trick for me is one of the discomforts I've had in working for corporates for a long time has been this fury. It is fury. And my counsellor would say, decrease the charge before you talk about it, Tamara. So we'll keep it short. But this inhuman element. So the approach, the way people speak, the way people treat people. For me, as people go up the chain, often the humanity would seem to lessen and things would come into play. I was up on site at our main client in the mining world, and I was in the hot desk area, and I felt funny, and I said to one of the girls in admin who works up there, FIFO, I said, is there a lot of Perth people here today? And she said, tons. And I said, senior? And she goes, we're all. And I was like, I can feel it. It feels so yucky in here. So the problem that I've got is I just feel the fury and work up to the level I'm employed to work at and get along very well at whatever level. And it can be quite senior once I get to know the person. But I see people being treated badly. I see people particularly not being communicated with appropriately, not being given news on time, being treated as mushrooms, right? And that's the piece. So for me, you must be able to work at this more senior level and access the humanity of people that I have not seen before, right? Like, how do you do it? How is it because you look at them as human beings and am I missing an opportunity to get to know them personally so I don't have that? I want to calm down about it all.
No, there's one element that is the they, right? Because if anytime someone's the they, then it's super hard to obviously connect with them and to see the person underneath it. I think, one of the things that is not a positive byproduct is, I guess it is, of this work is, there's a helpful level of weariness in terms of the lack of reactivity, but there's also the sense that the corporate culture kind of piece is, for me, there's a little bit of it that's even comical. I Tarzan, you Jane, kind of, I'd like to thank you all for your work. I was at a speech recently. I was presenting after something, and I just thought, man, this guy's just given an entire speech thanking everyone for their work. I would bet $50 he does not know who he's talking to or why or what. Someone's just so you could insert X here and do all the other teams and all the other sites and all the other. So I keep a bit of a sense of humour about it, that this is that thing that we're all doing because it looks appropriate. I also I have a great faith that it's just a moment in time and it will shift. Okay. I look at sporting cultures and the way they used to be in terms of, high performance and excellence, and they're all going back to a care culture. They're all going back to care first. They're all going back to trust and true collaboration and a lack of ego, and they're all being encouraged to have balance, and so I think corporate culture will follow. So I see it as a moment in time. I see it as something that maintains itself, but that is actually not necessarily, people just get whipped up in doing what the other company's doing and then what the other company's doing. And we're all just doing this thing like the Emperor's New Clothes, and it's not working. It's not helpful. No. And we'll pay the price. Corporates will pay the price by people leaving and not being happy. Yes. And they'll whinge about people not wanting to work hard, but it is what it is. And, so I think that will change. So I get to see the individual humans behind this stuff at a very deep level. Yes. And then to kind of say, well, how can we translate more of that? But as I said, I just don't buy into it. I think some of it's almost, I'm not making fun of it, but like I said, I'm just like, this is really interesting. But I don't think it's the way of the world. It doesn't need me to defend it. It's going to not work. And okay, I love that. Yeah.
So what you're saying, that it's done a couple of things. One is it's given me hope, because I've realised in my fury I felt very hopeless. And the other thing is because my experience, when I can speak to a human being and see what's underneath whatever behaviour they have the freedom to see them. Whereas because I haven't generally accessed the top level of big organisations, I've been working middle management down, some quite senior managers, but not the executive level.
Sure.
They are the they for me. So I've
But
yeah.
I also think because you are high empathy in terms of that feedback loop and those sorts of things, we do start to reflect and empathise with the experience of
Yeah.
the workers that we're dealing with. And I think that's a positive thing, that you can actually feel what they feel as well.
Thank you. I think it is positive and I think it's nice for them in the moment. I think what I like about what you're able to do is the actual difference is made being able to access the top level and help them to humanise what they're doing and have courage to be willing to be vulnerable. And I have a theory which I've made up because I actually don't know people in this sphere really at all. But, I remember reading a thing many years ago around the people that will make the biggest difference don't have the drive to get there, and the people that have the drive to get there won't make the biggest difference because the people that are most sort of caring or whatever don't have that, I'm going to be the CEO, know. But that piece you said about the human beings being there, I had a fellow I was speaking to on site and I went back to his senior manager and I said, oh, what a wonderful fellow he is. And they said, what are you talking about? He has the worst reputation. I don't know what to do with him. He's a nightmare. And I said, oh, no, he's really good-hearted and he's just an anxious fellow and, he looks like he's undiagnosed with something and, oh, no, like you misunderstand this fellow, right? And the reason I told that story is because you made me realise those stories would be everywhere at the higher level. I just don't access them.
Yeah.
So I feel impotent and angry because you're right. I see the impact of their not great communication often.
Yeah.
It's not even their intention actually. It's just terrible communication.
Yeah.
I really want Andy, with my support, to write a book that originally I was going to call it Corporations Are the C Word, and I thought that's a little strong, and it certainly does show my charge, as my counsellor would say. But then the second name I wanted to call it was We're Not Here to Fornicate with Arachnids because, we're not here to F spiders.
Yeah, wow.
Fornicate with arachnids came from because sometimes just all that's needed is clear and honest communication.
Yeah.
That's all that's needed and everyone would be okay.
Yeah, agreed. And you get that in culture surveys, right, where the higher up in the organisation you are, the more positively you see the culture because you're like, no, we're here to do good things and I know what our intentions are and we want equality and then people go, yeah, just not seeing it.
No, that's not day-to-day what's happening.
Absolutely. I think the other thing, which I guess is a sort of a theme of what a lot of what we've talked about today is, sometimes people say, oh, what do you do? What's the approach? How do you, but I think honestly one of the most powerful things is to be able to sit with people, and it sounds naff to say not judge them, but I noticed during COVID, because again, what we do is very private, and so mostly nobody knows what you do unless you tell them, oh, I had this person today and this happened,
That's
obviously
right.
with all confidentiality.
That's right, yeah.
And then during COVID, and since then now with Performance Story, a lot of that being online, sometimes the kids or my partner, if they're home or they come into the study to get something or whatever, they can't see the person and they can't hear the person often, or they can hear me but not the person or whatever. But they get enough of an intersection of, and so somebody could say absolutely anything to me and it's not going to surprise me and it's not going to make me judge them.
No.
And I think that somehow when people know that alone, the people that I learn the most from are the people who have had awareness and have been through stuff and they're less reactive and they're less idealistic. And someone could talk about a sexual dysfunction, or a CEO could talk about by the way, need to stop using cocaine on the weekends, or, all this sort of stuff. And you're just like, all right,
Got it.
that's what we're talking about. And there literally genuinely is no, expectation or so I think sometimes that it makes it easier to do the work, but it also makes it easier for people to talk because, like, as I said, there's absolutely nothing
Yeah.
over time
Yeah.
that you sort of don't hear. I mean, obviously the details vary, but in terms of
Yeah.
someone who is about to blow the previous perception of themselves that they put forward out of the water by disclosing something, or and so that's a comfort, and it's a faith that people at some point, if they can find someone to
Yes.
talk that stuff through with,
Yes.
they'll probably change it.
This has been massively useful for my own peace of mind, because the approach I take with people I'm actually working with is a complete love and acceptance. I just love them, right?
Yeah.
If I can't love them, I tell them I'm not going to work with them. So I had a fellow on site who was just messing me around the first appointment, and I said to him, "You don't want to do this, and you don't have to. It's it's not an obligation." And then his supervisor said, "No, I want him to do it. I want him to do it." And I said, "No, he's not into it. He was just messing me about. My time's too valuable. I don't want to do it." And he said, "Let him have a talk to you." And I said, "Okay, come on, you want to do it?" And he said, I do. I wasn't in a very good frame of mind when we spoke first. I do want to do it." And I was like, right. I said, "Okay, we're going to have one conversation and we'll see how we go from there." And then as we had that conversation, I went, "I'm going to love this fellow. Like nothing prior has happened. Let's see where we get to." And it's the only thing that makes a difference is, the people can only be what you expect them to be.
Yeah.
And I expect them to be amazing. And once in a blue moon, they're not. But often I get to see the amazing. And what you've helped me with is I've been busily really balling myself up into a little flame of fury around people I have never met, and people I haven't worked with, and people I haven't been able to assist access something that they, in my opinion, clearly need to access, because that would shift some of these behaviours.
Yeah.
But that's why I'm so grateful to you. And when I put that comment on the psychological safety, when you said about the kids waving out the window, that was so beautiful. That shows, right? People, I was thinking about that, your kids, so you put a story on LinkedIn to give context about your kids waving out the window and people smiling and waving back. And I thought, people smile and wave back because they're not frightened of the child.
Yeah.
But adults are all frightened of one another, so they
Yeah.
don't do the, "Hey,
Yeah.
buddy, how are you?"
Absolutely. But more to the point, again, the feeling in that sort of example, that the gratitude that I had for a stranger, that they made the world a safe place, You just, it's like, someone pats your dog or something and you just kind of feel like, the dog gets all excited when they see the person, and I'm like, you've just given this, and you have this gratitude for this person. And the point there obviously was with workplaces, that when they see that you are good to someone, it helps so much more than the person that they've just been good to. But
Oh, yeah, how beautiful. We're so lucky, aren't we, this work we do. We do different work and at a different scale, but this ability to be with people, see people, have them feel loved and cared for, and, like I said, that's who you are for me. And I know in your mind there's always more to do, but I just am really grateful for what you've done so far.
Thank
you.
you.
I feel really so honoured that you're here today. It's just been delightful.
Thanks for taking the time. It's been lovely to have an organic conversation, but obviously a learning and reflecting conversation for both of us. It's really a rarity for me, not just to be sort of having to talk about the future of mental health and strategies and those sorts of things. So thank you for I guess making this process happen, and it's going to be a brilliant podcast series, I'm certain.
Oh, thank you. I so appreciate it. I'm loving it. It's been the joy of my working life. So, thank you.
Thanks.